slick. Couldn't say too much as I was wearing my mask, but just came out of the booth. The hood, the trunk, the cowl cover, and the spoiler. We're doing those first so that we can see how our white lays out. So if anything happens, we've got a few parts that we can play with and redo. I mean, I gotta be honest, it's just a single stage white. I've laid down this paint quite a bit, so I think it's gonna look pretty good. I mean, the first coat, I imagine once it flashes off, might see a little bit of transparency. Sorry about that. Anyway, we might see through it a little bit, and if that happens, we just put another coat. So we're going for basically anything that showed, like the primer. We threw a little bit of white on it just to kind of blend it in. I lit that tack for just a couple minutes, and then we did our first coat. And I gotta say, I got the gun set at about 26 pounds. It's a 4:1:1. It's about a mid-grade paint, Limco Supreme Plus, just single stage urethane. And it seems to have covered the parts nice. More importantly, it laid down nice and glassy. It looks like clear coat over base. So that's a nice thing when you do white, because whites can be funny. And the trick is, don't put too much on, because you can't really see the white as well as some of the other colors, so you tend to want to put too much on. So make sure you do what you do, run at a decent speed, and don't go too crazy. And I'll probably I'm running, let's say, about 60-70% fan. So basically what that means, if I run a coat, and let's say I'm running this wide a fan, that's the paint going on the car. So I'm coming off the edge first. I'll probably 3/4 the edge, then I come about here, and then on the next one I'll come about here. And I'm putting not quite enough on, so it stays a little bit bumpy, almost like a light orange peel. But when you come back and you do that next layer, you just move it slowly down a little bit, and then you catch that so that you put enough material on. And I'm fanning it really wide, and what happens then is that'll fill in the difference, and you'll see it level right out. Now, it doesn't have to be 100% on the first pass. I think it's going to be pretty close, though. So basically, you want 3 coats over anything primer. So that's why, like I say, there was only a few spots on there where we had to do that. The primer I used on the cowl cover was a little bit darker, so we're probably going to do a 3rd coat on that anyway. But basically, after our 2 coats, we'll look at it really well. And if it looks good, you can always walk away, because this stuff, they recommend 2 or 3 coats. So once we get 2 full wet coats, especially over primer, and the primer gets pretty light. In the video, it might show up dark, but gray primer is pretty easy to cover with white, especially in a single stage. Now, if it was a metallic, I'd seal everything first. The other thing you can do is basically just shoot your white over top of the primer, let it flash, and then do your first coat over the whole thing. So either way, it's just a way of getting rid of the color. But we had everything prepped and sanded and pretty clean, so I think we're going to be okay. I think our white will be nice, and realistically, I'm going to do 3 coats on the hood anyway, because the hood is sort of the highlight of the car. Most cars, when you walk up to them, I mean, the side's got to look good. If there's the odd blemish, look, nobody's going to care. You can always cut and buff the car and buff everything out. I try to not do that. This is a daily driver quality job we're doing, something that a guy can take to weekend shows and the county fair and that sort of thing, right? So this is not going to be like a crazy Autorama show car. It's just going to be something really nice on the road. So basically, once we get this down to where we're happy with it, you know, I doubt we'll do any buffing, unless, of course, we get a little run somewhere, in which case we'll have to wet sand the run out, cut it a little bit with a polisher, and then polish it into the paint job and call it good. So that's basically what we're doing today. It is Sunday. So that's one thing you'd learn about quitting your job and going on your own. You'll become self-employed. That doesn't mean you work less. It means you work more. The upside to that is you do it on your own terms. Kind of watching the time. We should have enough flash off now. I'm going to throw my mask on, take you into the booth. So I'll be seeing it for the first time too. Wow. So far so good. Got a beautiful reflection. So that means we basically got our speed and our pressure, our overlaps done fairly well. Now one thing with this paint, you're better to paint fast than slow, because if you come across and you keep catching the wet and bringing it, once you get it, if you see a little dry spot, you can blow a little bit across and it'll melt right in, but you got to make sure you do it right away, because if you wait too long and it starts to set up, it'll put fuzziness or a dry spot. Like if I come right down here, you can't tell on camera, but I can almost see through the paint a little bit, like a shadow. But that's okay, it doesn't matter. You just want to get enough on there that it looks really good. If it's a little bumpy somewhere, that's okay too. A little dry spot is okay. This is the first coat. On the second coat, we'll run it a little bit quicker, but not too much. But we'll get a little more coverage. We'll run about a 60-75 overlap as we go, a little extra on the edge. But down here is where we'll start. We go around the edge. We're just going to color that because we don't want it to pull and run. And then we'll come up about halfway across the edge and then start doing our overlaps. And basically what I did is I ran my overlap, and because it's non-metallic, I was able to run a nice swoop and stop about here and then come back over it. I did that right up over the hood and drug it the other way. And I came down to the middle and I painted down that whole pointed section right to the front. Keep in mind I did the outer perimeter first before anything else. And then what I did is I came off that wet and came this way and brought it right into where we were wet. And then went over to that side and did the same thing. For the trunk, I cut the little inch lip. So on the second coat, we didn't go too crazy, so you might see it looks a little dark. You can almost see through it, and that's okay. On our next coat, we'll make sure we get good coverage, because now that it'll turn into like a glue, the next paint will go on it, and it won't want to run unless you put way too much on. So we didn't put too much on there. And then of course we did catch that edge around real quick. We just have a tape on the bottom of the edge because we're not redoing underneath. But basically once I did all around the edge, I caught this edge and I came up real nice. And as soon as it laid out where it was nice, again I went to that 60-70% overlap and worked my way across the whole thing. When I got to that end, it looked really good. I hit the front edge of this piece up to where it's taped. And then I came to the back side, I went all the way around the perimeter, and this one I just basically shot right across in one shot. It looks really good. And one thing we noticed doing this one, there was a spot, a primer here, and it was a little darker. After it was shot, I came in, and because we're going fairly quick, we put another little bit right on here, and you can't tell. There's no dry spot. It melted right in. This part of the spoiler actually shows on the car, so we basically went across that real quick all the way around, and from here out, when you open the trunk you see the bottom, so we sprayed those, and then basically we just went across, worked our way up and over the top, and I think I did 1, 2, 3, caught the top edge a little quicker. I blended those in, then I went to the back side, came on an angle so we could catch that top. Once the top was lapped, it's basically 2 thin coats. Then we just continued with our overlap, which was about 3 strokes. And that looks really decent. It's too bad we can't stop right now and put it on the car. Like, that's how nice this is. However, you've got to make sure you put enough paint on the car. It's too thin, won't be strong enough to stay on. I'll do a second video after we get the next few coats on and she's all done. Cheers.